Hello, everybody, and welcome to CELPIP Writing Pro Target 5. This is Brandy speaking, and I will be your presenter today. Now, I see we've got people settling in online here and already saying hello in that Zoom chat box area, so thank you so much for doing that. I'll remind you quickly that your microphones in Zoom are muted by default. So if you do have questions today about the session, kindly place your questions in the Zoom chat area, and we will answer them as we go along together. Please keep an eye on your email inbox because within the next 24 hours or so, you will be receiving an email from the CELPIP team with links to help you continue to study at home. So there will be a link within that email that will take you to a survey if you want to give feedback on the session. That's more than welcome. You're also going to receive a link that will open a study pack of materials. And this study pack will summarize the important writing skills that we're talking about today. It's also going to contain all of the sample responses that we'll be discussing. So do keep an eye for that. And last but not least, within that little email, you're going to receive a link that will take you to a previously recorded version of this same Writing Pro Target 5 session. So if you can't stay for the full time today, that is more than fine. You can log out whenever you need to and rewatch a recorded version later on so that you can catch up on anything that you might have missed. All right, so I'm going to quickly introduce myself, and then I'd like to hear more about each of you in the Zoom chat if you're able to. My name's Brandy, as I said, and I'm an online instructor for the CELPIP test. So I do a ton of presentations here on Zoom and sometimes on YouTube or Instagram. And my role within the CELPIP team is to prepare all of you to be more confident and to develop your skills so that you'll be more successful as well. Okay, I'm from Northern Ontario, but I currently live in Vancouver, which is British Columbia. So let me know where the rest of you are tuning in from right this second. Where are you all listening from? Okay, I see Toronto, I see Edmonton. A couple of you from Edmonton today. I've only been there once, but it's a nice city. Oh, we've got the Philippines online. We've got Brampton. Okay, Edmonton, Mississauga. Most of you so far are in Canada, which makes sense. I think a lot of us are already settled here and looking to take CELPIP maybe for PR status or for some other purposes. And while we're at it, let me know what brings you to CELPIP. Let's do that as well while we're on it. What are you aiming for with the CELPIP test? Are you aiming for your permanent residency status or your citizenship or your PGWP applications? What's the purpose here? And while I'm waiting for you to let me know, I see we also have Nigeria, quite a few of you from Nigeria today, which is nice. Must be quite late in the evening for you. It's 9:30 in the morning for me. Oh, we've got people from Israel as well. So yeah, we're pretty far and wide today. Nice to know. Okay, so far everyone in the Zoom chat's letting me know that they are taking CELPIP for PR applications. And a few of you are doing it for educational purposes. Okay, good to know. It's helpful for me as your instructor to know what your ultimate goal is. So I sincerely hope you've done a little bit of research and have figured out what your score you need for your own CELPIP test. Now, before we get into writing skills practice today, I did want to let everybody know, in case you're don't know about this, that CELPIP is used largely for Canadian immigration, but also for Australian immigration. You can take the same CELPIP test, and with that score report, you can also now apply for Australian work and visa purposes, which is really exciting. All righty, here's what we're going to do together today for the duration of our session. I'm always start off with a little introduction to what your writing test is all about online here. It is a computer test, so it's just a matter of knowing what the computer screens will look like and how this test is scored and so on. So we'll try to keep that introduction to a brief amount of time, maybe 15 minutes or so. And we're going to then look at two different tasks. You have two tasks for your CELPIP test. In the first task, you'll be writing an email. In the second, you'll be responding to a survey question. So we'll have a look at how those screens are formatted and what's expected. And then for the fun part, we're going to get into the specific key writing skills that you'll need to achieve at least a level 5 or even higher, depending on how far you push these skills as you practice at home. And then we're going to do some response analysis. So for the two writing tasks for CELPIP, I've got 4 different actual test taker answers that were completed at some time in the past by these test takers for CELPIP. And as a group, we're going to read through them and we're going to focus on the rater's checklist or the scoring skills. We're going to identify what these writers are doing quite well and where they still need to improve. And as a group, after we've analyzed every single response, I'm going to launch an online Zoom poll, and I'd like you to vote on what score you believe that writer has earned. Now, today's session we call Target 5. So the response levels that we'll be looking at hover about the level 4 or 5. So for those of you applying for PR status, you're probably wanting a score higher than a 5. That's okay. I hope that you follow along with the lesson today and pick up the skills that you'll need to be successful. But do be aware that the response pieces we'll be looking at will target about a level 4 or 5 because some people need a level 4 or 5 for their own purposes here. We do have a target 9 writing session, by the way, a 9+. So if you haven't already seen that, that would be a good one to come back to as well. At the very, very end, of course, I'll take just a handful of minutes to remind you about our free study products and also introduce you to the online bookstore. So let's get underway with your writing test overview. So here's a good look at those 2 writing tasks I mentioned that you will complete for CELPIP. When you enter the testing room for CELPIP, and you absolutely must complete this test in a testing center. You cannot take the CELPIP from your home computer. When you enter the testing room, you already will have completed your listening and your reading test before you get to the writing component. And then after you finish writing, of course, speaking follows. And that's if you are applying for your permanent residency status. That's the general test. The writing test itself takes a total of 53 minutes at the most. You can see that you've got 27 minutes for task 1, 26 minutes for task 2. Some of you, the more you practice and the faster you get at writing, you'll likely finish ahead of time, which is wonderful. But just know that as soon as that maximum time is up on the testing part, whatever you've got typed into the computer for your answer is going to be saved and sent out later on to the rating team to assess. So we do want to make sure that we are capable of writing a good 150 to 200 word excerpt for each of these tasks within that time allotted to you. So that's where practice at home comes into play for sure. Now, the questions that you'll encounter, as you'll see just in a moment here, are based on everyday situations. So whether they're community, whether they're workplace. So what I would encourage you to try to do is draw on your own life personal experience. If you've encountered something similar to what the test question's asking you to write about, by drawing in details of your own lives as you respond, I think you'll think of ideas much more quickly and be able to expand and develop those ideas to make them interesting. And those skills are definitely going to support a stronger CELPIP score for sure. Here is an example of what your computer screen looks like. Now, we're not going to workshop this precise question. We cover this one in a different webinar, actually. But I wanted to simply show you that you do have 2 sides of every computer screen to read. Okay, so just like you would in a book in English, you're reading the left-hand side first. This is what's going to give you that background context, so you know the situation. And then when you look at the right-hand side for your task 1 email, this is where you'll notice you're told who you are supposed to email. This one says write an email to the restaurant's manager. You'll notice that for the email question, there are always at least 3, if not 4 bulleted points. And these are the main tasks or the main ideas that you absolutely must cover when you're writing out your answer. Okay, we do ask you to try your best to use your own vocabulary instead of copying off the computer screen. You are being scored for vocabulary usage. So the more variety of words you can demonstrate to the rating team, the better your score will be. But you must address these points. You yourselves are going to come up with specific details to support all of these main points as you write. The word count is also on screen. You've got between 150 and 200 words. So that's facing you in case you forget what your word count is. Just have a look at your test instructions. And word count is a very small part of your score. So we do want to make sure that you're following that. There is a word counter right on screen. So that should be easy for you to locate. And again, it's an email. So for CELPIP, you don't have to worry about your to and from lines or your subject or date lines as you would in the real world for an email. When you write your response here for task 1 on the test, we simply ask that you start with the greeting, right? So dear whoever it is, and then type the rest of your email. You will have a sign off and a signature at the end since it is email format. And following the appropriate structure is also going to help your score a little bit. Now, your writing task 2 is a survey question, and you'll notice that the screen's are structured similarly in the fact that you've got two sides to read. So once again, the left-hand side gives you the background information about what this survey is all about. On the right-hand side, once again, you have the same word requirement. So if you forget, you can read those instructions there. But the whole point of this writing task too is to select one of those two options. You can see option A and option B. So you want to select one of those as your position or your main point. And then you're going to come up with probably 2 or 3 reasons why you feel that the option you've selected is the better choice. Okay, so that's the difference between your task 1, which is a basic email. Task 2 is more about your opinion and supporting it with valid and logical reasons. As you sort of take a further back view, I guess, of the same computer screen, you'll notice the timers at the very top, and this is helpful. As soon as you begin any part of the test, I think you should look up here and note how much time you have in minutes or seconds. You can see yourselves that you'll be typing into that big white space towards the bottom of that portion of the screen. All right, so finish up before this counter clock gets to 0. It starts at 27 minutes for your task 1, and it'll count backwards. Those of you that do finish early, you're very welcome to click this next button right up here. And when you click next, of course, you're going to move yourself forward to the next computer screen. You do need to be aware, however, that you can never go back, right? So once you go next, you're moving forward. It's too late to return to a previous question to fix it up. So be confident if you're clicking next. And the other thing to note here is that you do not get to carry with you extra time remaining from one screen to another. So every single test part is going to begin with its only preset number of minutes or seconds. All right, so good tips to know, I guess, as you're preparing and studying at home. The word counter is usually below the writing space, but you'll see it on the computer screen at some point. All right, and as you type words in, of course, that number will increase. And then as you take words out, it's going to decrease as it would. But you do want that counter clock to get between 150 to 200 for full scores on your test. And believe it or not, there is a spell check actually. So if you're typing away and the computer does not recognize a word that you've typed in, it will underline that word for you in red, just like it would in a Microsoft Word document. So what you have the option there of either fixing the spelling yourself, or you can take your mouse and hover over it. You can right click with the mouse button on the underlined word, and the computer will usually suggest a corrected spelling. It might even present to you a short list of words. So it's really up to you to determine which is the word you're intending to spell. That part's on you. That at least the spell check is going to help identify words that it's truly not certain about. It's not recognizing. Okay, but here's the trick with spell check. Spell check is not a word choice correction. So if you type an actual English word, even if it's not the word you mean to say, the spell check feature would not catch that as an error. So if you look to the left of the screen, you'll notice there are 3 pairs of very easily confused words for spelling as they're so close. So you can see staff and stuff, word and world, quite and quiet, and so on. There are many words that are similar looking with their spelling patterns. So let's pretend for a minute you meant to type the word quite, but you accidentally typed quiet. That would be a word choice error, and that would be up to you to catch. The computer or the spell check is not going to recognize it. So we do encourage you to read back your writing before the time is up and do a little proofread. Make sure that all the words that are written in on your answer are the ones you intend is all. Okay, there are some easily confused words too. There are many, as I just mentioned. Here are 3 more pairs that we see actually quite often on different sample responses. So the words customer and costumer, affect and effect, and employer and employee, and so on. So we have to know the difference in meanings of all of these words in order to choose the right ones. We're going to do just a very quick practice activity here. I'm going to place 3 sentences on screen. Let's look at number 1 to start with. There's one word there that is just the wrong word choice. Can you find the error and correct it for me, please, in the Zoom chat? Many staff at my office have children, it says. We know that's wrong. So let us know what the correct word should be in the Zoom chat, please. Yeah, the word is Staff, exactly. So that's a perfect example. If you type the word stuff, it's not going to help you. It's going to be a word choice error, and that might have a negative effect on your vocabulary, depending on how often you make those mistakes. So we want to catch that and write staff. Let's go on to part 2 here. Please replay to my message, it says. That's not right. Let's fix that one up as well, can we? Yeah, lots of people have that right already in the Zoom chat. Please reply to my message. And number 3 is maybe the toughest, but I think we can fix it together. Have a look at number 3 and let me know what the right word is, or what it's supposed to be anyway. Yeah, good. Everyone's catching it. It's not activates. That is a real English word, but what we want to type in is activities, right? So these are the types of errors that I want you to be on the lookout for in your own writing. As you finish your answer, read it through and just double check. If you catch these mistakes, then you can still fix them before the time is up on the screen. Okay. I'm going to talk just a little tiny bit about how the writing test is scored. You need to know this if you're going to score well, right? So first and foremost, on the CELPIP writing test, it is scored by an AI human hybrid system. So what that means is it's combining artificial intelligence with a human rating panel. So that's why I keep referring to them as the rating team, if you will. Okay, now all CELPIP scores before they're released on your official score report are reviewed and verified by the team to ensure that the score is meeting the very strict protocols for what goes into the scoring of any language proficiency test. So the little chart on screen that you're seeing here, this is your best friend as you are practicing your writing for your CELPIP test. You will receive this chart. It's called the Writing Performance Standards. You will receive it in your study pack. You're also going to be able to access it publicly on the celpip.ca website. So what it is a list of 4 different skills categories. We call them dimensions, and you'll see them listed down the left-hand side. And the rating team, as they're reading through both of your writing responses for CELPIP, their job is to see how many strengths you can demonstrate across all 4 of those categories. And they'll also note your weaknesses and give you a score accordingly. So starting with that content coherence section at the top, the rating team will ask themselves, how well are your ideas organized and developed? So think of it this way, the more interesting, the more you develop and support your ideas with examples and details, the higher the quality of your writing, and therefore the better the score. Whenever you do give a main point, you always want to back it up with some sort of example or extension or development to make it really engaging for the reader. Under vocabulary, of course, we want to choose words that make sense. So the meaning has to be clear and accurate. But the trick to vocabulary is it also has to be natural and suitable. So we don't want to be memorizing all sorts of big, long, complicated words and forcing them into our writing when it just doesn't make sense to use that type of language. So be natural as you are writing. You also, to score better, are going to want to demonstrate a good variety of words. So we don't want to just repeat the same words over and over. Having a nice range of words is going to help. And also being precise with your word choice is also going to help. Under that would be readability. And readability speaks mostly to your writing mechanics. So think about your sentence structure, your spelling, your grammar, and your ability to paragraph or organize the response. Your job as a writer is to make it as easy as possible for somebody to read through your response and understand your ideas. Again, to score very highly here, you'll want to learn at home how to write more complex or complex compound structures. The more sophisticated the structures are and the more variety you can demonstrate, if you can do that correctly, then you will score better under readability. Last but not least is task fulfillment, and this is going to speak to how well you're following your test instructions. So in other words, did you answer the precise question on the test, and did you answer it completely? Are all of your details relevant and on topic? Are you using the right tone? So have you decided, are you supposed to be casual or formal? Who are you writing to? That's going to make a difference in your choice. And here's where the word count or the length of your response is going to come into play as well. So remember how your test instructions say 150 to 200 words. So it's in your best interest to follow the test instructions, and you'll score the best in that way. The last thing that everybody wants to know about the writing performance standards and how your writing test is scored is that your score on both of your writing tasks is going to depend on a combination of the strengths and weaknesses you demonstrate across all 4 of these dimensions or categories. So coming into this test with, say, just a strong vocabulary, you'll score well there, I guess. But if you're not demonstrating strengths in the other 3 areas, and in fact, if you make major mistakes or errors in those other 3 areas, you'll likely not receive the score that you were aiming for on any given task. So when you study at home, again, this chart is your best friend. I would encourage you to do your own practice, then look back at this chart and go through those factors that you see listed down the right-hand side. Make sure that you're actually following them and demonstrating as many strengths as you can. If you notice that you're really struggling with 1 or 2 of these, that's where you want to spend your studying time. So if you can pick out the weak areas in each of these 4 categories and then improve upon them at home first before you take this test, that's really how you will improve your score. Okay, now you mentioned earlier, a lot of you mentioned earlier that you are hoping for a PR application in Canada, and that's why you're taking CELPIP. A few of you, I think, mentioned as well that you might be taking this for school or work. So have a look at the CELPIP score chart. Do you know what score you need? Let me know in the Zoom chat right now what score it is you're aiming for. You'll notice that level 12 is the top score. And if you achieve level 12, congratulations. We call that expert proficiency. And then as we go down the chart, you'll notice that the descriptor word changes ever so slightly. So a lot of you, unsurprisingly, are looking for that level 9 or 10, and that would be typical, I suppose, of somebody applying perhaps for permanent residency here in Canada. So look at what that requires. Level 9 is effective proficiency. Level 10 is highly effective proficiency. If you are applying for your PGWP, your score is likely you're aiming for a bit of a lower score. That's where you might be aiming for, say, a level 7 or a level 5, etc. So my best advice to you is to check all of the government websites before you actually take the test, as sometimes information will change, and make sure that you know what score you need to fulfill your own purposes. So as I mentioned when we began today's session, we call it Target 5, because that's really the skill set that we're focusing on today. So level 5 would be what I would consider to be sort of a high beginner, somebody who is still acquiring proficiency, but they can still put forth some ideas that make sense to address the questions, as you'll soon see in a moment here. So when you actually do take the test itself and you're told that your score report is ready to view in your online account, when you look at the actual score report, and that will come back to you, by the way, in about 3 to 4 business days. So looking at your score report, you'll see immediately what level you got in writing. And depending on what level you see there, you're going to have a unique performance profile. And a performance profile is simply a little write-up. It's a summary of skills that somebody who is earning that level on the writing test should be able to demonstrate in very general terms. So a level 5 writer for CELPIP can write short texts, but they're still coherent, meaning they still have an organized pattern and logical flow to them. The level 5 writer tends to write about very common day-to-day contexts. It's a little bit harder for someone at that level 5 to think creatively and abstractly and approach this with a higher level stance, right? So it's more about common day-to-day context. The grammar and sentence structure that we see at level 5 tends to be relatively simple. So there should be some adequate or some very fine control of those simple structures, but a lot of mistakes tend to occur when level 5 writers are trying to demonstrate compound complex sentences. So that's what acquiring proficiency means. It means that we have these foundational skills and we're still learning to develop them further. As far as vocabulary goes for level 5, the majority of the writers here are using common words, but a lot of the words too, you'll notice are probably memorized or templated as well. So this is a sign that the vocabulary is just not as fully developed yet that you would expect to see at the intermediate or advanced level. So we're relying a little bit too heavily sometimes on memorized phrases to tuck into our work. An example of a memorized phrase, by the way, is when you're concluding an email and you say something like, "Thank you for your time," or "Let me know your thoughts." That's a perfect example of these memorized phrases that are so generic, they don't add any value to the context, right? So we want to, as we get more developed with our skills and above the level 5, we want to come up with our own expressions to show the rating team that we have a more developed vocabulary. Anyway, let's jump in, shall we, to our task 1, which is all about writing an email. And here is the question that we are going to workshop. So I'm going to ask you now if you could read the two sides of the screen to yourself, and then we're going to share some ideas in the Zoom chat about how we might answer this question. All right, hopefully that's enough time. Now you do have 27 minutes to complete the entire writing email, but the faster you can read your question, of course, the more time you have for the writing. So part of your studying at home, I encourage you to develop your ability to skim read quickly so that you can speed things along a little bit. Anyway, let's get right into the questions. So it says here you are an elementary school teacher. So what that means is you teach children. It just simply means that you teach young children. So in the Zoom chat box, can somebody suggest a particular grade maybe? When we address a question on the test, if you can pinpoint a very precise focus of your writing, it's going to keep you more organized. So when you're teaching young children, what grade does that bring to your own mind? In Canada, elementary would be from kindergarten to about grade 6, just give or take. So I don't want you to choose a range of ages. No, I want you to choose one age. It's going to make a world of difference in how focused your answer is. So I see grade 4, grade 3, grade 5. Sure, now you're on the right track. So let's pick one of those. I see quite a few people with grade 5 chosen. So let's go with that today for fun. So when you're typing, commonly about level 5, it would be common to have somebody type and say, I teach elementary school. And if you do that, of course, you're sort of answering the question, but you're not being very precise about it. So for those of you targeting a higher level score, you want to be precise. So I would say I teach grade 5 or whatever grade it is you've chosen. So let's go with that one just for an example today. And the next piece says that you're writing to a famous writer. And again, at level 5, most people would be general. They might just say, dear sir or madam, which we don't ever want to do, by the way, not even in the real world, because it's too vague, it's too general. If you were writing to a famous writer to visit your class and to do an activity with the children, you would probably know the name of that writer, correct? Okay, and I also want you to notice, I'm throwing a lot at you, I realize, that when you looked at your instructions over here, it says write to this writer and invite her to speak to the class, the children in your class. So whoever this writer is, it's a woman, right? You know this by this pronoun her. So I'm going to ask you to let us know in the Zoom chat box who your favorite female writer is. If you can't think of a famous female writer, I would like you to choose any woman's name in the whole wide world, even if it's your own, if you're a woman, or make one up. It really doesn't matter. The CELPIP test is not going to fact check you, but what the CELPIP test will do is recognize that you're coming up with more precise and interesting ideas. Okay, I'm seeing Jane Austen. I'm seeing J.K. Rowling. Wonderful, wonderful. Marian Keyes is one of my favorite authors and so on. So I'm going to use Jane Austen for fun today. Some of you might not know who that is, and that's okay. What I'd like you to do is look at the structure of my greeting. I'm just typing it into the Zoom chat. Can you see it there? Notice how I did not use the name Jane. Did you know that when we are writing to a stranger, in this case, we don't know this author personally, we have to be formal. And when we're being formal, we're not allowed to use first names. I don't know if you all knew that or not, but now you do. And I want you to apply these rules in the real world as well, such as when you're applying for a job interview or making a cover letter. Really important skills to have. So because it's a woman, did you notice my title word is MS period, Ms. If this was a man, it'd be easy, it'd be Mr. But it's not a man, it's a woman. So the only title word available to us is Ms., MS period. We're not going to use Miss because that would signify that the writer is single. We're not going to say Mrs. because that would signify that the writer is married. And another rule that I want you to memorize is that when you're being formal and writing to a woman that you don't know, it's not polite to even refer to relationship status. So we're going to go with Ms. because it's the safe, neutral middle word. That's the only option available to you. And then you have the last name. So you're not going to say, Dear Ms. Jane, that would be wrong because you're using a first name. You're not going to say, Dear Mr. Smith, because that would be wrong. That's a man. Do you want to have about 15 seconds to try to practice this structure? I'm going to write it one more time into the Zoom chat because it's been brought up a little bit with all the people writing in. So have a look at my structure. This is your example or your model. I'd like you to copy that, but use your own last name. Go ahead and practice this in the Zoom chat so we can get this out of the way. Dear Ms. Austin, that's one way if we were writing to somebody with that name. How would you address your greeting here? What would yours be? Let's have it. Anybody want to try? Oh, don't have any guesses yet. Okay, well, I'll leave it with you then. You can practice this important skill by yourself at home, but just have a look one last time into the Zoom chat box and you'll see my example, and I want you to follow it. Look at my capital letters. Look at my punctuation. Note I'm using Ms. Note I'm using the last name, and I still see people doing this wrong in the Zoom chat. So I'm going to leave this with you. And I want you to take your own time at home to practice because it's super, super important. Okay, so dear Ms. Austin, we have that out of the way. Over here, now we get to the good stuff, as we call it. These are the main points we absolutely must address. So we have to introduce the author to our school. At level 5, the majority of writers would probably just say something simple in general, like I teach grade school or I teach young children. If you're aiming for a higher level score, you're going to want to be precise. Can you name the school? What school did you go to when you were a young child? Anywhere in the whole wide world, it does not have to be what sounds like a classic Canadian name. Could be anything. But what school did you attend? Okay, as you're typing, can you do me a big favor, everyone? Can you really practice your capital letters and your punctuation? Yeah, that's part of your skill, and it's going to make you a stronger writer. There we go. Glasgow has it perfect. St. Scholastica. Oh, is that a grade school though? St. Scholastica's Academy? I guess that could be children, eh? I just worried for a moment. Okay, if it's a grade school, fine. You don't want it to sound like it might be high school. That's my only hesitation. With the word academy, it sounds a little high level. But sure, if that's a grade school, then that's fine. Okay. CELPIP Elementary. Love it, Gavin. So yeah, you can make up the name of the school as long as it sounds like a real name that could be a child's school. Agincourt Colleague Elementary School. Sure. Notice how Simon has capital letters on every single word in that title, and that's perfect. It's exactly what you want to do. Now, that's a really long title, so I won't remember that in my practice. So for the heck of it today, let's go with CELPIP Elementary, just because it's shorter to say out loud. So as we're typing, we write to Ms. Austin and explain that we teach, I think we said grade 5 at CELPIP Elementary School. The only other detail I could think to add would be to include how many students are in the class. These instructions do say introduce Ms. Austin, I guess, to our school and class. So naming the school, naming how many children we have would be helpful. So maybe we've got 27 grade 5 students, just for an example, okay? So these are the types of details that you come up with on your own based on the main points that you see here in bulleted form. Once you've done that at some point, it's probably going to be one of your first paragraphs. It is your introduction after all. You're going to then move on to a different main idea. We have to explain to our author, in this case, Ms. Austin, why the children like the books so much. Now, at level 5, it would be very common for the writer to simply say, the students love your books. And you could see that that idea makes sense and it follows the topic, but it's also so general. So if you're aiming for a higher level score than a 5, you're going to want to be precise. Can you think of the name of a book that is suitable for children? Think of a book that you really enjoyed reading when you were a young child. If you've got children right now, think of a book that they are reading. And if you can't think of a real book, please make one up, but just make it sound like something that a grade 5 student would enjoy. And in grade 5, students are about 10 years of age, just to put that into perspective for you. Any books come to your mind? Any books at all? I'll give you just a moment. We don't want to spend too much time on this, but I certainly want to give you some guidance today. Okay, Barney. Sure, the autobiography of Barney. Now, general science, maybe. Is that something that a grade 5 class would enjoy, though? I don't know. Whatever book you pick, can you look right below that? Look to the very bottom of the instructions here on the screen. You have to come up with an activity that the writer is going to do with the students. So whatever book you pick something that would be interesting to a young audience and that you could envision a really fun activity that they could do. And that's my only hesitation talking about general science. I really don't know what on earth the author would do with a bunch of grade 5 students if the book they're reading is about science. That's my only hesitation. So make it easy on yourself. The Secret Lake sounds fun. I see people suggesting titles like Dogman and Spider-Man. Once again, can I ask you all to really focus on your capital letter use? I know Zoom chat is casual, but we also want you to have automatic grammar skills, right? When it comes to writing. Look at Barbara's perfect example, Colors of the Rainbow. She's capitalized the important words in that title with a capital C and R, and she didn't need to capitalize of the, because those are not important words. Fantastic. You clearly have studied your grammar, Barbara, I can tell. Okay, Hung has it too, Stranger Things. Shira, can you put your capital letters on that name? That would be wonderful. And now we are into it. Look at all the wonderful ideas in the Zoom chat. Okay, Jurassic World is mentioned here by Grace. Now, I know that as a movie name, but we're going to pretend maybe it is a book too. I don't know. But again, let's pretend it's a grade 5 book that the students are reading, Jurassic World. Okay, so now we have a title. Jurassic implies it's about dinosaurs, by the way. What is it that our children love about this book? Jurassic World. You have to come up with this on the spot. And again, a level 5 writer who is acquiring language would probably approach this in general terms. They might just say, oh, that the story is interesting and leave it at that. But if you're aiming for a higher level score, you want to develop this with interest. So I'll give you an example and you can think on this for homework on your own. So if my students were reading, if my grade 5 students were reading Jurassic World, I might just say, as I'm typing to Ms. Austin, I might say, the students are so excited to be learning about dinosaurs. They love the action scenes in the story when the characters are running away from the dinosaurs and trying to save their own lives. Something like that would be just fine, right? I'm focusing on the story and the action, talked about characters and dinosaurs. So I'll leave that to you to practice at home with your own ideas, if you don't mind. So we can move on here. We have to invite Ms. Austin to the classroom at some point, but we also want to be respectful and mindful of her time. She's busy. She's a famous author. And if we send this email today and say, can you come visit us tomorrow morning? I'm guessing she'll be too busy. That's probably way too last minute. When you invite somebody in this situation, if you wanted a guest speaker into your classroom, what would be a reasonable window of time to give them? I would give them a little bit of a flexible date time. I think 1 day is far too short notice. What would you suggest here? What makes sense to you? When you're planning an event, how much time do you give your friends if you're planning a party? Do you phone them up and say, hey, come on over in 2 hours time? Probably not. Most people are busy. What would make sense here? Nandy's saying a week. Someone's saying a month. Oh, Misbah, no, it's not a week or two. It's one or the other. Hey, can you change that answer and be more precise? Precision is your best friend on any writing test and in the real world too, for that matter. 1 week seems to be the common answer here. Okay. So what I would do is maybe give some dates. Can we be that precise? Can we write and say, Ms. Austin, would you be free to visit us sometime next week between February 23rd and 27th, or whatever dates you happen to come up with in the spur of the moment? So you're giving them a range of dates. And if you wanted to be extra fancy, and we're getting really up into the score chart here with the way we're approaching this, can we even suggest some times? You know, are the kids fresh in the morning or are they fresh in the afternoon? Do any of you have a window of hours that you want to suggest? Just think back to how a typical school day is structured. You're probably not going to meet at 7 p.m., right? That doesn't make sense. Most kids aren't in school then. So we've already established a week. We've given some dates as an example, February 23rd to 27th, whatever time you want to come up with. What hour window do you want to come up with? Pick something in the morning or the afternoon, but be precise with your hours. Okay, Igwe, that's too precise, don't you think? If you say come at noon, well, what if Miss Austin's busy at noon? It's not around 9 to 10, Glasgow. No, it's, can you come from 9 to 11 maybe, or 9 to 10? Yeah. Don't be loosey-goosey with your times, because you need to know when the author's coming. The author needs to know when she's expected. And if you say, oh, around 9, well, maybe Ms. Austin rolls in at 9:30, and then what, right? So again, you've got to be precise, not just for CELPIP, but in the real world as well. Okay, so Nandy is suggesting, Ms. Austin, would you be free between 11 to 12 any morning of next week? We've already said February 23rd to 27th or whatever. And you might even explain, is that is right before the lunch bell and the children will be fresher. I love that. That's a great idea. Shira's wondering if Ms. Austin's available from 10 till noon, and so on. Now you've got it. Do you see how that's so much better than saying, oh, come in sometime around 10? Nope. It's from 10 to 12. That's the time we're inviting you. Are you free any morning next week? Yeah, that would be a better approach, I would suggest. Here's the hard part. Okay, you have to put on your thinking caps and try to have some fun. Remember what it's like to be a child when you're hopefully carefree and you're reading this wonderful book called Jurassic Park, I think we said. And we already established that the students love the storyline with all the adventure scenes with the dinosaurs chasing our characters. So if we've already talked about that, what do you suggest that Ms. Austin could do with the children when she visits? Can you put an activity together that really capitalizes on that sense of adventure with the dinosaurs that the students love so much? Can you think of an art project? Can you think of a drama play that they might act out? Or can you think of something else? Let me know in the Zoom chat. I've got lots of ideas, but I want to hear from you. When you were in grade 5, what did you do for fun in class? Hopefully you had some fun when you were in school. And if not, you're going to have to think of something. I say always base it on your own life if you can. Maybe you've got kids in about grade 4 or 5 now, and you can think of something that they're doing in their English class that might come to mind. Anybody want to go? Okay, yeah. I wouldn't do a Q&A. That's not my preference, but if you want to talk about it, sure. I think doing a role play game, oh my gosh, that would be so much more fun than just having the students listen to Ms. Austin talk. Don't you agree? Grade 5 students are about 10. Do you really want to sit on the rug and listen to a stranger talk at you for a half hour? Or do you want to get moving and interacting with your peers? Probably, right? So can we put the students into small groups of say 3 or 4 students per group and give them a half an hour to act, like to put together a mini play, a role play, where they can actually dramatize or act out their favorite scene in the play? That'd be fun. And it would be so suitable for this activity, don't you think? If you don't like the idea of drama, again, maybe art is more your thing. So maybe you could say, Ms. Austin, we would love the students to complete an art project. We're going to give them each a poster board, some pastel crayons and some water paints, and ask them to paint their favorite scene from the book. Would you be willing to lead that activity and to guide their thinking? Anything at all is fine, but I do want you to try your very best to be a little bit imaginative. Again, at level 5, you're not going to see these ideas. What we've just done together is way above level 5. So at level 5, when we're acquiring language, we'll probably get a much more general approach. And that honestly would be more like, can you talk to the students about your book? You'd probably see those types of ideas more. But I really want you to come into this with a sense of passion for the writing and try to have some fun with it and make your answer unique and different from all others. Okay, anyway, let's really get into the email structure, and then we'll move on to task 2 before the response analysis. So an email, of course, has to start with the greeting, always has to. And we practiced the greeting a little bit earlier today, but there is a slight difference between writing to a stranger and writing to a friend. So I really wanted to make sure everybody has this in their memory bank for the CELPIP test, but also for the real world. So when you're writing to a stranger, which is what we're doing in this precise question, writing to this famous author, we're going to be formal. And that's why we're using the formal word dear as our greeting. Okay, I bolded it once for you in that top line, so you'll remember it, dear. So for a man, it's Mr. and the last name, I just made up White. For a woman, as we practice with Ms. Austin, it's dear Ms. Little, or whatever the last name is. That's just another example. This is a relatively new concept that some of you might not be familiar with even, but if you are writing to somebody who identifies as a non-binary, so they don't firmly identify male or female, if you know that that is what their identity marker is, you could instead use that title word MX period. All right, it's not super common. I'm sure that you haven't used this yourself. You maybe haven't seen it either. But just in case this applies to you or you see this someday down the road, I wanted to bring it up as an example. But what I also want you to notice is the capital letters and the punctuation for every single example. This is what the formal greeting is going to look like. And that is going to look very different from if you're being casual. So if you know the person's name, if it's a friend, if you know them well, if it's a colleague you work with every day, it is perfectly fine to be casual. And instead of saying dear, you probably would say hi, or sometimes even hey, right? These are very casual markers. So it's up to you to tell the difference. It's totally up to you. to decide if you're being casual or if you're being a little bit more formal. But regardless of how formal or casual your response is for the greeting, you are still going to put a capital letter on every single word in the greeting. For the formal approach, that includes that middle title word. Okay. And you're still going to remember the comma after the greeting, like so. This is 100% the structure that we simply need to memorize and use it every time we write an email. Okay. If you don't know the person's name, sometimes that happens, and you'll see CELPIP test questions that doesn't give you the actual person's name, but you're supposed to email them. And if that is the case, what I want you to do is use the job title. Do not say, dear sir, madam. Do not say to whom it may concern, not even in the real world, because those greetings are just so general. They could apply to literally anybody in the whole wide world. And we don't want that. We want to be very precise. So when we don't know the name of the person, at the very least, we can throw in the job title. So maybe a CELPIP question is asking you to write to the manager of a restaurant. And if that's the case, well, dear restaurant manager would be fine. Maybe it's the supervisor at a transit company. So attention transit supervisor. Whatever the job title is that makes sense, you would insert it there. Okay, these are just two examples. Now, most of your greetings are going to use a comma, just like you see after dear restaurant manager. But in a formal email, every now and then, if you're being really formal, it's okay to use what's called a colon. This colon is the dot that you see here. So you could use that after a greeting when you're being very, very formal. But using a comma is fine as well. You could use a comma for any situation. But I wanted to point it out. You might see the colon from time to time, and now you know it's because it's a very formal approach. So with all of this under our caps, as they say, we've already talked at length about this question, and I've got 4 different multiple choice style answers here at the bottom of your screen. I want to know which greeting rather is the most appropriate for this particular question. Have a look at those choices A, B, C, and D, and let me know. Write the letter in the Zoom chat. Which one would you use for this question? There's only one. Just like on CELPIP, there's only ever going to be one correct answer or one best answer. And I want to know if we can identify it here. And it looks like everybody has it unanimously, which I love to see. Yeah, this is the only one that makes sense because, again, it's a formal approach. We don't know this person personally. It is a famous author and it's a woman, so we would certainly know her name. And because it's a stranger to us, that's why we're using Ms. MS period. And it's the last name Atwood. Okay, look at the capital letters, look at the comma at the end. So that is 100% a correct structure, but it also is the right content for this particular question. Okay, great work with that. Greetings can sometimes be really tricky, but once you've got the hang of it, it's just automatic. Every single email you write, you now have the structure and you're able to produce it accurately each time. Anyway, once you've got the greeting sorted out, you have to write the first paragraph of your email response. And most of the time, I'd say 99% of the time, we put the purpose or the reason in the very first paragraph. This is going to let the reader know right away exactly what it is you're writing about. So we're helping the reader out in that regard. Okay, so going back to this question, we've already discussed it. Now you can see at the bottom of your screen, we've got 3 possible purpose statements for this test question. Have a quick read through those 3 options, please, and let me know in the Zoom chat which letter you would select as the best purpose statement for this particular test question. Okay, a couple of guesses are coming in here, and I'm seeing you're very torn. You're twixt in between as an expression. I think everybody is leaning towards B and C. So first of all, let me congratulate you that nobody has selected A, and I'm really pleased about that. The test instructions up top there say that we're supposed to invite this famous author to come speak to our class. So there's no way A makes any sense. We're not writing to this author to let them know that we're a teacher at an elementary school. That doesn't make any sense. That's not the purpose. So I'm thankful that nobody has selected that. Now, when you look at B and C, the ideas technically are the same, but there is one that's much better. I'm going to read out loud B and C. So when you hear the words, maybe it'll push you to write towards the right answer. But B says, I'm writing to invite you to visit my grade 3 language arts class next Friday afternoon. C says, I'm an elementary school teacher and I'm writing to invite you to speak to the children in my class. More of you have selected C, but I'm going to disagree with you. And the reason I'm going to disagree with you is because of this. Look back up top to that test question. Do you see where I've underlined for you? The exact words in the test question say, invite her to speak to the children in your class. In answer choice C at the bottom, it says, invite you to speak to the children in my class. You can see that all we've done is copied word for word almost from the test instructions, and we never want to do that. So answer choice B still gets across the idea that we're inviting the author in. That is exactly why we're writing. But look at how many really precise and interesting ideas and details we've also included. So we've mentioned we teach grade 3. We've mentioned language arts. We've mentioned precise date. Again, I would give a window of time, but at least by saying Friday afternoon, we get that the invite's been produced. So this is what you want to do if you can, okay? The more you're able to use your own ideas, add in your own precise details, and use your own vocab, the higher you're going to score overall. So at your very best, try not to copy from the test instructions if you can at all help it. Overall, it will make you a better writer, I think. The body paragraphs are going to come next. So after you've got your very short introduction, you've got your purpose statement, which is clearly going to be inviting this famous author to come visit us. We need to write a couple or 3 even middle paragraphs. That's why we call them body. It's like the middle part. All right. And what the body paragraphs do, this is where all of the very specific details come from. So remember those bulleted points on the test? In this question, I recall we have to come up with, explain why the children like the books. That's going to be 1 paragraph. We'll identify the book and explain why the students like it. And then a different paragraph is going to be what activity we would like the author to do with the children and so on. So all those wonderful specific details that we were talking about earlier, this is where they belong. It's right in the body or the middle section. And again, we will score better overall if we can use our own vocabulary. So after you've got the 2 or 3 body, the number of paragraphs you need depends on the actual, how many ideas you have, I suppose. But to end the email, of course, you need a concluding statement. And your concluding statement is short and sweet and to the point. All right, you're going to have 1 sentence and it is simply going to summarize the email or probably leave a request for next step. Now, in this case, remember, we want this author to come visit us. So if this were my answer, I'd probably say something in the end about how the class is looking forward to her visit and can she kindly let us know if she's available to visit. Something like that would be perfect for this type of a response. So with that in mind, can we do a quick activity here? I'm going to flash 5 different concluding statements across the screen. Some of them are fine, very appropriate. Others are not at all. So very quickly, we'll use the Zoom chat to determine which ones we might use and which ones we wouldn't use at all. So here's your first one. It says, please let me know if you're available to visit my class next week. Could you say that? Is it polite? Is it respectful? Does the content make sense? Remember, this is the very end of the email. It's the last thing that the reader is going to have a look at. So we already would have given the main part of our answer by the time we get here. And I'm really pleased that most of you are saying it's fine. Yeah, I love the language, please. It's so polite and respectful. And please let me know. Like, we want confirmation. Are you coming? Are you not? But we want to say it politely. So please let me know if you're available. That's perfectly fine. That would work just fine for this question. What about this one? I need you to tell me when you're gonna come to my class. Would you say yes? Would you say no? I need you to tell me when you're gonna come to my class. And I'm so happy to see everybody without question here is saying no for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's incredibly demanding and bossy. We would never write, I need you to do this for me, ever. It just comes across as really rude. And then the expression gonna, we might speak that way. We might talk or text that way, I mean, but we would never write a formal email using that kind of slang. So for those 2 reasons, the tone is all wrong for both the message, the bossiness, as well as the actual words that we're using. So yeah, we wouldn't say that. How about this one? Anyway, I really want you to visit my class, so let me know when you can come. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark. What do you think? Okay, everybody's saying no, and you're right. Yeah, it's too casual yet again. So it's polite, and I mean the enthusiasm about really wanting the author there. I think that's great. Like we want our reader to feel that she's welcome, but it's just far too casual. We wouldn't start a sentence with anyway. We might speak that way, but we certainly wouldn't write that way in a formal email. And then with those exclamation marks as well, we tend not to use exclamation marks at all in formal situations, simply because it does turn it into a very casual remark. So for two reasons, I would say we shouldn't be writing that way. How about this one? I look forward to hearing from you about a visit to my classroom. I look forward to hearing from you about a visit to my classroom. I think this one's the best so far. I think I like that the best. I look forward to hearing from you is formal, it's respectful, it's polite, and then we've been context specific. It's about the visit to our classroom. So that part really anchors the entire response. And we have one more to get through here. Email me back as soon as possible and tell me your schedule. Is that okay or not? And everybody's saying no. Again, it's relatively demanding and bossy. We're barking orders at the reader by telling her what to do. And we're demanding to see her schedule, which frankly is none of our business. My goodness. Why would she share her entire schedule with us? It's not our business, right? So that would be rude. Instead, we want to phrase it like we did in D. We still want her to come, but we want her to let us know if she's able to come. So that's definitely the better approach for sure. So nice job on that. Using the right tone is really going to enhance your ability to communicate clearly, not just for CELPIP, but I keep saying in the real world as well. The last thing you want to do is offend your reader. It's the last thing you want to do. Anyway, after your concluding statement, of course, you're going to have a sign off. And I don't want you to overthink this. This should be so quick and easy. So if you're being formal, like we are doing in this particular test question, you have probably two sign-offs that will work for any situation. And commonly in Canada, we say regards or sincerely. If you wanted to get a little fancy and put two words together, you could. See, my first example is kind regards or best regards. You could do that as well if you wanted to. You just have to memorize capital letter usage to get the grammar right. So if you've got a two-word sign-off, like kind regards, you only capitalize the first word, capital K, no capital on the R, however. If that is too hard for you to remember and to do correctly, just use one word. Just say sincerely or regards, because you know that a single word sign-off has to start with a capital letter. So you're never going to get that incorrect. Oluwamanchuwaku, I hope I said your name right. We do not use the sign off yours in Canada. I know it's used elsewhere and it's fine. But part of being an accomplished writer is recognizing who our audience is, and different cultures have different expectations. It's not rude. It's not a huge problem, but if you are communicating in Canada, I encourage you to drop the yours just because it's not customary and some people might be a little unfamiliar with it. Does that make sense? Again, it's not a huge deal. Like if you did that on your CELPIP test, it's not going to destroy your score. But just looking at this from a real world perspective, I thought I would make that distinction is all. Yeah. If you are being casual, some people will use the sign of cheers. It's a personal choice. I have never used this in my life. It's just not my style. But you absolutely could in a casual situation, or even casual, you can still say best or regards or sincerely. So you can never go wrong with those. Sincerely, regards, and so on and so on. Okay, so again, it's just being familiar with the structure of an email and a little bit of cultural expectation too, I suppose, as we just talked about. Yeah. Yeah, Omer saying best wishes, it's passable. It's not super common, I wouldn't say, but it's definitely has the right tone. It's almost a little too formal for some reason to me, but again, that just might be a personal preference. But anyway, you can use it if you wish. I'm just letting you know it's not super common, not as common as what you'd see like regards or sincerely. Yeah. Yeah, Alejandra, don't say thank you. Why are you thanking the author? She hasn't even told us that she's coming yet, right? So you don't yet have anything to thank her for. Once she gets back to us and confirms, well, it might make sense to thank her for visiting, but that would go in the concluding statement. That is not a sign off. See the difference there? Yeah, a sign off is meant to be right before the signature, which is exactly what we're talking about now. Yeah, the last thing you need is a signature. So you can't get this wrong. My goodness, it's a name, right? If it's formal, though, there's one more detail I want you to memorize if you can. If you're being formal, you would sign your full name, first and last. If you do not want to use your real name on the CELPIP test for security and privacy, you could make a name up. You could go Jane Doe or John Smith or whoever, it doesn't matter. But if it's formal, like in this situation, you put your name there. One of you asked earlier, shouldn't we be introducing ourselves in our introductory paragraph? I would say no. You're going to tell her in the introductory paragraph what grade you teach and what school you're at and so on. Your name comes at the bottom in the signature anyway. So it's really not necessary to put your name in the first paragraph too. I think you're just putting too many words down now and it no longer makes sense. Yeah. So save your name for the end. If you're being casual, if it's someone you've already been communicating with or you know them well, etc., a first name is more than fine. So there's just that slight distinction between the formal and casual signature. But I think it's a pretty easy rule to remember. Hopefully you'll remember it. Anyway, when you're done writing the entire email, you've got 27 minutes total. I would encourage you to try to use no more than, say, 24 or 25 minutes just to get the email written. And that will save or give you about 2 or 3 minutes at the end to double check your work. You need to read it over. This is called proofreading. Any mistakes you find at this point in time, this is how much time you have now to fix it, to maximize your score. Because when that clock gets to 0, whatever you've got typed into that computer screen is what's being sent off to the rating team to evaluate. So things like grammar, the organization of your ideas with your paragraphs, your vocabulary, word choice, answering all parts of the question. These are definitely big ticket items, I'll call them, really important skills that you want to double check you've done to the best of your ability. Yeah. Okay. Now we don't have to read this particular response. As a matter of fact, I think this one earned about a level 7 or so. I simply wanted to point out the parts of the email that we were just talking about. So have a look at the greeting up top. This is clearly a bit of a casual approach, looks like, with the first name maybe. The purpose statement goes often in the first paragraph, which is why it's so short. You see 2 different middle paragraphs in the body. This is where the specific details would come. The concluding statement at the end, there's usually 1 or 2 sentences there that will summarize and leave a next step if there is one. You can see the sign off. Now he went with yours sincerely, and we've talked about that. I would drop the yours in Canadian communication style, and then the signature. And he got the name right. He got the first and the last name there as a formal approach. Yeah, so this is what it all looks like when you put it together in proper structure. Okay, so that's task 1 done. We're going to look at different actual responses to that coming up, but I did want to have a good look at task 2 first to get that foundation firmly set for us. So here's the question we're going to workshop. Could you have a quick look there, take about 30 or 40 seconds and read both sides so you know what the question's all about? Okay, pardon me. This one would also be about 150 to 200 words. So I wanted to point that out as we've seen in the past. This question, remember, is all about giving 2 choices to select between. Very aptly named option A and option B. If you select option A, you're going to be writing back to your boss, it sounds like, to argue that you just want to keep your vacation and you are not interested in going to this hotel for training. Or if you don't want to talk about that, that's fine. You would select option B. And this is where you'll actually accept the boss's invite to give up 2 of your vacation days so you could go to this hotel to do some training. We're going to workshop some ideas for this in just a second, but before we get into it, I wanted to talk structure. You absolutely must choose one option and one option only. You cannot support both. So that's a given, an absolute must do. Usually, I would say always, frankly, it's best to make whatever option you've selected, you want to put that in your very first sentence. It will be the very first thing that the boss in this case would read. So right away, he'll know if you want to go to the hotel or not. So make that crystal clear. So when your option is out of the way, and it's okay to have a single sentence by itself at the top of your response, next you're going to come up with the reasons for your choice. On a CELPIP answer, remember task fulfillment assesses your ability to answer the question fully and completely. You would want at least 2 reasons to suggest why your option is the best choice. You might even have 3 just to give a really well-rounded answer. Okay. Whatever reasons you come up with, keep in mind that each reason is going to be a different idea. So if you've got 2 reasons, you're going to have 2 middle paragraphs. If you're going to have 3 reasons, well, then you'll have 3 middle paragraphs. So each paragraph should discuss a different reason. And this is where you're going to try your utmost to come up with very specific details. And I'll help you with that in just a moment here. After you've got those body paragraphs, the reasons, finally, you're going to have a concluding statement. All right, so very much like we talked about for that email question, you'll have probably 1 sentence at the end that is, in this case, going to summarize your response. It'll remind the reader, in this case, your boss, exactly which option it is that you've decided upon. I do ask if you're going to be summarizing your opinion, change up your vocabulary. Do not just repeat what you said in your first sentence again at the end. Remember, a good variety of vocabulary will help your score on this test. And just like we talked about earlier for proofreading your task 1 email, your task 2 response as well, it still needs to be proofread. So you've got 26 minutes for this task. If you could write for 23 to 24 minutes and finish the entire response, you'll still be saving yourself 2 to 3 minutes to go back and reread and again, correct any mistakes you might find in all of those really important areas. So just to have a look-see at what the entire response might look like if you put it all together. Again, this is it's a level 7 actually this person got. And we won't take the time to read through right now, but I did want to show you the structure. So that first paragraph gives a little bit of background info and it identifies clearly that this person wants to keep their vacation time. They've got 2 different reasons, and that's why you see the 2 different body paragraphs. And at the very, very end, a concluding statement that just reminds the reader that the vacation time is the important thing for them. Okay. So let's apply this all. Let's put it all into good practice here. Remember, we've already talked about what the rating team is looking for from you to demonstrate. And we've already talked about at level 5. This is sort of the benchmark that we're starting at. Level 5, these are writers that can write short text that address the question that's still coherent to a point, but grammar will be quite simple. Vocabulary tends to be also very common or sometimes memorized. So at the level 5 under content and coherence, the best advice to anybody wanting to get above a level 5 is to make sure the ideas are organized. So we always want a new paragraph for a new idea, and we want transitions to introduce them. At a very basic level, you might just say, first of all, secondly, third, and so on. That's fine. But we don't want to jump around between topics, right? Every main reason has to go in its own paragraph. That's really, really important. And as far as vocab, we've already said that at the level 5, we tend to use more common words and phrases. But regardless of what level you're aiming for, whichever words we choose, they need to be appropriate and natural. We never want to use short forms or slang, like the examples you see at the bottom. We're never going to type gonna, wanna, you guys. We might text that way or talk that way, but we will not be doing that in any writing piece. Even if it's a casual email, it just doesn't have a fit there. So we want natural language and a good range if you can. Here's a fantastic activity to practice for vocabulary. Can you have a quick look at the left-hand side of the test question? You've already read this question through, but just look at the wording on the left-hand side of the question screen and then quickly read over the sample response in the computer monitor to the right. Let me know what the problem is as soon as you notice it. So we're looking for the mistake. What is the problem here? What do we want to improve upon in order to earn a higher score? Aha. Some of you are starting to see. No, it's not punctuation, Glazel, but nice try. I mean, there might be. I didn't actually look too closely. There was something else that I noticed right away. I'm going to read off the test instruction screen. Listen to the words, and I think it'll be super obvious to everybody. So at the left-hand side of that test question, it says, you work in a small office. The boss wants to reduce vacation time by 2 days, but send everyone in the office to a nice beachside hotel for 4 days of job training. Some of the staff are very happy with this idea, and so on. Over on the computer monitor, this was the beginning of a sample response, and it says, the boss wants to reduce vacation time by 2 days. He will send us to a beachside hotel for 4 days of training, and so on and so on. We've copied pretty much word for word from the computer test question. And if we do so, I mean, the good news is at least we're addressing the question and the ideas are accurate. But the bad news is we are not getting any credit whatsoever for vocabulary, for grammar, for sentence structure, because these are not our words. These are words from the test instructions. So as I've said before, and I'll say again, you will score better overall if you can practice the ability to paraphrase, use your own vocabulary to express the ideas. And then the rating team will see that you do have a better range of vocabulary and you'll score better. Okay, so keep that in mind. Let's do one practice activity with specific details. This is helpful for any level of writing, level 5 or level 12, doesn't matter. We all should be using specific details. So down the left-hand side of the screen are very general ideas. First one says the local park. As quickly as you can, what's the first name of park that you can think of? Let me know in the Zoom chat. The first park name that comes into your mind, what would it be? Let me know in the Zoom chat, and mind your capital letters, please. The names have to have capital letters. Okay, Parade Ground Park. I would just add the word park in to make sure. Elm Park. Thomas Park. We need a capital letter on the word P for park, by the way, because it's part of the name of the park. Yeah, okay, good, good. So this is what you're doing on your CELPIP test. Names are not, don't overthink it. My goodness. You want to spend your thinking time on the details. But if somehow your question involves a local park, don't just write, oh, the local park, because it's general. If you can name it, it's all of a sudden more interesting. I chose Stanley Park because I live in Vancouver, and this is a very, I don't know what world famous, but a very popular tourist park and a beautiful place to be. So whatever you think of, write it down. Don't overthink it. Okay, let's go on to the second one. My boss. Who's your boss? Let me know. Really quick. It can be a formal title or it can be a first and last name. Let's do a quick capital letter check in the Zoom chat. Looks like a lot of people are using the formal approach, which is fine. I also used the formal approach, but I chose a woman rather than a man. Either way, doesn't matter. I went with Ms. and then the last name Johnson. You might, if you know your boss really well, this could be casual. Like it could just be, hey, Brian, or hi, Brian, or something like that. That could be fine as well. But again, don't overthink of it. Grab onto a name, and then that's the name of your boss. And then you have more time to think about your details later. What about the school near your house? The school near your house. Actually, we already talked about schools earlier, didn't we? So you pick one. So I went with Hillside Elementary School. I've heard of this school. I think it actually exists in Vancouver somewhere. And I threw in a street name on Maple Street rather than near my house. I felt that was far too casual or too generic, I meant. So on Maple Street just gives it a little bit of precision. And last but not least, a city. And I asked you earlier where everybody was listening from, and a lot of you already typed this in, right? So same, pick a city name. It does not matter what city it is. It just has to be a city name. I went with Vancouver because that's where I live. Some of you live in Toronto, Edmonton. It has to be a city though, not a country. That's the only thing. Yeah, anyway, really quickly, this is what you do on your CELPIP test. Whatever names come to mind, throw them in and on you go to the more important matters of the actual test question. Okay, to make our response very easy, I've said it a few times now, we do want to start each main idea in a new paragraph and make sure we are formatting the writing correctly. Okay. Here is an example of a response that was delivered by an actual CELPIP test taker. What I wanted to show you about format, the proper format is all of the writing, every single line does begin against the left-hand margin, as you can see. So that's what we want to do. When we're typing on a computer screen, the cursor and the arrow on screen where we're typing always brings us to the left-hand margin. right after we get to the end of the line. So that's what we want to do. You'll notice that this particular writer, it looks like her name at the bottom is Evelyn Wilson. We'll go with that as the CELPIP test taker. For the most part, she has used one empty line correctly. So after the greeting up top, she's thrown in an empty line and so on between paragraphs. So when you're finished off with your paragraph, you're going to hit the enter key, I guess twice, because you want to leave that one blank space. Now down towards the bottom, she should have had a one space between her concluding statement and her sign off. And I don't quite see that, but for the most part, she's using the spacing appropriately. And when you leave the spaces in the right places, it makes it easy for the reader to see how your work is organized, which is exactly what we want to do. Okay. Another structural format that she's demonstrated quite well is she's left only one space after every punctuation mark here. So at the end of a sentence, we put a period, and that's where the first arrow is on screen. And then we hit the space bar once only, and we begin with a capital letter, of course. That second arrow is pointing to a little comma, and we will use commas when we're pausing. And then we hit the space bar once, and we continue on. It's so important to leave spaces in the right places. As you'll see, I've got some great responses that I'll show you that did not do this, and it makes it really hard to read. Anyway, that's part of your readability is the structure and the format. And at a level 5, most level 5 writers, even though they're acquiring language, are still able to use some transitions or conjunctions. All right, I've listed a couple examples of more higher level conjunctions on screen. You'll see them as firstly, however, although. Okay, I think at the level 5, it's more common to see the simple words like first, second, third, which is a good start. But as you want to push your skills further, I do want you to learn different conjunctions and transitions, higher level words like however and although and so on. Of course, we want to capitalize and use punctuation and grammar correctly as well. All of these elements simply make the response more readable. And for task fulfillment, of course, we have to complete all tasks. For the email, if you've got 4 bulleted points, address all 4 of them. If you miss one, you're no longer having a complete answer. So make sure you follow instructions, and your language should be suitable. So remember, we talked about, is it formal? Is it casual? Figure that out and write it accordingly. Okay, with that under our belts here, we're going to get into the response analysis piece of this lesson. So I've got 4 different responses I wanted to run through with you today. So we've already talked about these 4 categories under the writing performance standards. We're going to come back to these 4 categories every time we look at a sample response. So we're starting with our task 1. This is the email to the famous author. We've already talked about this at length. Remember, we want to invite this author to come visit our class and conduct an activity with our students. So I'm going to show you the first sample response here based on that question. I see at the very bottom of the screen centered, you'll see the name of this test taker, Abigail J. Malcolm. Now, she has not used spaces well, but we can still decipher the name, Abigail J. Malcolm. Okay, can you take about 30 or 40 seconds to skim read her response? And then we're going to talk about her strengths and weaknesses and figure out if she did earn a level 5 or is it maybe a level 4 even? We'll figure that out in a minute. Oh yeah, you're not guessing the score yet. No, that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is reading through the response. You're very welcome to comment on skills that you see that are either strong or weak. We could do that if you'd like. But yeah, let's save the score report until the very end. That's the better way to do it, I think. Yeah, it is hard to read, Gavin. I agree. Why is it hard to read? Let me know. Let me know. I'll give you about 10 more seconds here and we'll discuss together. Oh, there's more than a few grammar errors, Nandini. Yeah, there's a lot of grammar errors for sure. Okay, here's what I'd like to do. I know that we could spin this in so many different directions and we've got something like 20 different skill sets we could look at. So to keep us all focused and to understand what the important skills are that we need to demonstrate to score well on CELPIP writing, I'd like to walk us through those 4 categories of the CELPIP score raters checklist. I'm going to start backwards though. I'm going to start with the bottom category, which is all about task fulfillment. And what I want to do is very quickly look at Abigail's response and just double check if she's even addressed those 4 bulleted points from the question. Did she understand the instructions and did she address them? So first and foremost, she was asked to email a famous author. And it doesn't look to me like Abigail has understood what this question is asking her to do. She's actually addressing her class. She's not even writing a famous author. So that part would be a major weakness, right? We're not following the instructions appropriately. Another main point we were supposed to talk about is we had to introduce the famous author to our school and to our class. So have a look there, especially at that opening paragraph, I guess. Does Abigail have any details about, say, the grade level she teaches, the number of students? Does she name the school? Does she give a location of the school? Do you see any of these details whatsoever anywhere within this email? And I suppose if they were there, they would probably be in the first paragraph. And unfortunately, the answer to that is no. She has not followed instructions. She has not included any of those details whatsoever. The next main point from the test instructions is that Abigail was supposed to explain why the children liked the book. So have a look again at that first paragraph. Did Abigail actually, did she identify a book or did she explain why the children liked it? And I would have to say, once again, she seems to have misunderstood, right? Instead, she is asking the children to explain why they like the book. And she identifies why she likes the book. But the test instruction says you're supposed to explain to the famous author why your own students like this book. So we still are not quite following the instructions as we're meant to. Okay, now did she invite the famous author to the classroom? Have a quick look. And she's kind of going all over the map here in order. Kind of. There is a suggestion of an invitation, but rather than invite the author to come, she explains to the students in this email that she's already invited the author to come. And it looks like she thinks the author is a man on top of it. She says, I've invited him to come. So we sort of have an invitation, but it's not quite what the question was asking us about. And then does Abigail explain what this famous author will do with the children? And this is where she actually does give some very relevant details. She says that the author is going to explain why the author likes to write so much, what inspired them to write the book, and then he'll read, or I guess she will read part of the story to us. So that part of the test instructions actually has been done relevantly and accurately, okay? But it's only one. She has misunderstood the vast majority of all of the other instructions. Have a look down to the word count at the very bottom. What is the word count for CELPIP again? Let me know in the Zoom chat, please. Let's remember this important detail. Do you remember what the word range is? Yeah, it's between 150 to 200. So if you get within that range, then you're following test instructions. But Abigail doesn't do that. Her response is too short. And remember, she skipped over and forgot to address a lot of these test instructions. So it's no wonder that the response is so short, right? You could write another 75 words here and still follow the word count requirement. So that's part of the problem. I think the response is just underdeveloped. And then I think the tone, even though she's misunderstood the question, the tone is still friendly and polite and respectful and so on. But when you look over to that sign off, it's not even really a sign off. This is where we probably would see regards or sincerely or something to that effect. But instead, Abigail's written, "Oh, thank you, and a pleasant day to all," which frankly doesn't even make sense. I don't know why she's thanking her class or her students. So this would need to be rewritten. It's incorrect in structure and both in content as well. I would say overall that the response that Abigail has written, it seems to read more like a script than it does an email, and it does not cover the relevant parts of the task. So her task fulfillment score would be quite low as a result. Okay, now that's just task fulfillment. When you think back to the top category of that rating checklist, it's the content and coherence that would be assessed. So under content, we've got a lot of details that are missing. We don't know anything about this class, right? We don't know what grade, how many students. We don't know what the school is or where it is. Other details are not precise. We don't know the name of the book. We don't know exactly why the students liked it. So more details would be necessary to flesh out that content and to develop it in a well-meaning way that makes that response more engaging and interesting. I would say for coherence sake, coherence is the organization. You actually do see some semblance of paragraphs, right? Her paragraphing structure is a little different from how most of us do it, but it's evident. She's got her greeting. There should still be a blank space here, but instead of leaving a blank space and starting every line of print against the left margin, she's made an indent. That's what this space is called. So she is indenting every time she has a new paragraph. And that's one way at least to signify that a new paragraph is coming. And she does tend to start her paragraphs when she is starting to talk about a new idea in a way. So those paragraphing skills are emerging, but those content details, as we said, are very underdeveloped. And she misses a lot of important details for sure. Yeah. Can we shift gears and talk about vocab? Can you have a quick look there? There are definitely words and phrases that are suitable. And I'm wondering if you can pick any of them out. We're looking for strengths now under vocabulary. Any words here jump out at you as words that are probably the best ability level that she has at the moment? What would you say? I think I've underlined about 4 or 5 different ideas here. So inspiring is a great word choice. Yeah, a lot of you are noticing that. The word awesome, I think that makes sense. Yep, yep. Did you see the word behave down towards the bottom? Yep, behave is a good one. And there's actually a couple of not just single words, but phrases, groups of words that she's able to put together. This is called syntax, when you choose the right words in the right order to make meaning. So when she says, introduce yourself to him, I know the content is not what the test instructions are about, but we're not analyzing content. Remember, we're looking at vocab. And she's actually able to group those words together in a way that makes sense. And I like his book. It's a simple sentence, but the grammar there's fine. The vocab makes sense, and so on. So these would probably be the best examples of her ability level for vocab. But there are many words that we would call imprecise or rather awkward. So the syntax is not quite correct. And you can see a lot of examples here underlined in red. So hope you liked him and why you like his book. Enjoying doesn't quite make sense. Why he loves and inspiring, and so on. So vocab, probably more areas of revision needed than we do have strong examples. Okay, and under readability, we've already talked about paragraphing skills. The paragraphs are evident, but a lot of you mentioned there are just so many spelling and grammar mistakes, and we won't go through all of them or we'd be here for quite some time. But what I did is I highlighted in green all of the spacing errors. One of you said earlier, this is really hard to read, and this is part of the reason why it's so hard to read. Every single time she's ended a sentence or put a punctuation mark, she forgot to hit the space bar and she's cramming her words together. So when you're trying to skim read quickly, it makes it really hard without those spaces. So that's what the green highlights are all about. The yellow highlights are just run-of-the-mill grammatical errors, and they range in error from capital letters that are wrong, sometimes word forms, punctuation, spelling, prepositions, word choice, etc. So oftentimes we understand the basic idea she's communicating, but with having so many errors, even though some of these errors maybe are fairly small on their own, having so many mistakes in just about every single sentence, they start to pile up, they compound, and they make it really difficult for the reader to get through. You know, even the name at the bottom is not spaced, and it's also centered in the middle of screen for some reason. It should be over to the left. Even that would have made it easier to find the signature and so on. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to turn off the Zoom chat box just for a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the first of 4 online Zoom polls. So I've got your full attention here on screen. So remember, we're looking today to see if students have achieved at least a level 5. So the responses we'll be looking at are going to be level 4 or 5. So that much we know. Do you think Abigail earned a 4 or a 5 for this particular answer? So please make your selection. I'll give you about 30 seconds for each online Zoom poll just to move things along time-wise. Don't be shy. This is anonymous and nobody here is going to know which answer you selected. Only you will, of course. If you get it wrong, that's okay. We'll let you know. Okay, we have a definite overwhelming majority here. So I'm going to end the poll now. Thank you for your participation. Here's what you've just said. So 91% of you believe that this is likely a level 4. And only 2 people think maybe it earned that level 5. So I'm going to let you know that, yeah, this is a level 4. This is indeed a level 4. So Abigail is sort of at the beginner level where she's got some ideas and some control over those simple structures. But as you could see, we misunderstood most of the instructions, frankly, and underdeveloped the content, and just the sheer volume of those grammatical errors and the spacing mistakes made it difficult to read. So that's a level 4. So with that in mind, let's go on to the next response. And I apologize if this font is a little bit small. What I had to do is copy and paste it exactly as it was submitted into the computer, because I needed you to see the actual spacing mistakes to make this make sense. Can you read through it? This is Bradley Pittman. Do you see his name at the bottom? He would be the CELPIP test taker, I guess, in this case. So read Bradley's submission. It's about the same question. And we'll see how he's done in comparison to Abigail. If you want to make any comments, feel free. There might be some strengths or weaknesses you're noticing, but I will definitely guide us through as we did the last one. Okay. Okay. So he's got spacing mistakes too. Maybe not quite as severe as Abigail's, but he's also made some spacing errors. That's sort of the first thing I noticed, if I'm honest. Let's get underway, shall we? I don't see any comments yet in the Zoom chat. So let me start us off, if you can, with task fulfillment. So have a look at Bradley's greeting. Okay, he didn't choose the name of this author, and all he did is say, "Dear Sir, Madam," which frankly doesn't make sense. If you don't even know if you're writing to a man or a woman, it's confusing. But at the very least, it would appear that he is probably intending to email this famous author, right? It makes more sense than what we had from Abigail saying, "Good morning, class." At least Bradley seems to be addressing a person, as this test instructions were asking us to do. Now, I don't know what Bradley was doing. For some reason, in the middle of the screen, he put the writer. Oh, you know what I think he did? I just thought of this actually. So this is where the greeting goes, and he put way over here the writer. I think what he's trying to indicate is that this is the writer, or the writer's name. So for some reason, he didn't put her name, and he also put these two words way over here, so it's not clear. Can we agree? Do you think that's what he did, or is there a different reason why he put the writer in the middle of the screen? That makes sense to me. I think that's probably what he did. Let me know if you've got a different idea, but that's the only thing I can come up with. And then he put his own name here, which I find unusual because the signature is down here. So I think if Bradley had removed this and removed this, it might have been a little bit better just from the get-go. So let's pretend those two phrases aren't there. We have to ask ourselves, did Bradley introduce this famous author to the school, to the class? Again, are there any details about the grade level and so on? And looking very carefully at Bradley's first paragraph, I again would have to say no. Bradley still doesn't understand the scope of the question, and he is indicating that he teaches high school. At least he's a teacher, that much he got right, but the test instructions specify you teach elementary school. So this is a completely incorrect detail. He's not demonstrating that he's following the instructions. So that would definitely have a negative impact under the task fulfillment. But right after that, remember, Bradley is supposed to explain why his students enjoy the book so much. And he does a decent job of that, to be quite honest. He doesn't pick one particular book. He does lump it together generally. He says the students love all your books. I think it would have been better to pick one precise book title, but at the very least, he's got this right. He says the students love the books, and he does explain why. I guess the stories about everyday things, the class is wondering how the books are so interesting, and so on. So that idea has been developed with a little bit of supporting detail there for sure. Okay. There is also an invite. I don't think it should go in the same paragraph, but at least we have an invite. He wants to know if the author can come in. He specifies just one day, Might have been better to give a range, but at the very least, the invitation's there. Would you please come on the 25th of November to meet with the class? So that part's been accomplished, following instructions. And he even suggests what the author might do with the students. Bradley would like this author to explain how they started writing books and what was the first book and so on. Okay, so we don't have a lot of precise or interesting details, but at the very least, Bradley has at least addressed or followed that part of the test instruction. And that's exactly what we want to do for task fulfillment. Did we follow instructions? Did we demonstrate we understood what we were supposed to be writing about? If you check out his word count towards the bottom, he does follow the required range between 150 to 200. So that will help him. The length of his response is accurate, but he doesn't quite get the sign off correct. So we want to drop the or. Regards is fine, but we do want to put a capital letter on it. Okay, so that wouldn't be a huge mistake. It's not going to completely have a ton of effect on the score, but it's just something that we should be aware of is all. Yeah. Oh, and Chioma has a great question there in our Zoom chat box. While you're typing your answer, the test question is on the same computer screen. Yes, for sure. You're typing in a little square box area right below the question. So you'll always be able to look back up and keep on track. Most of us would do sort of one main idea at a time or one bulleted point at a time. Yeah, so that's incredibly helpful for sure. So please use that to double check that you are on track. Yeah, good. Okay. As far as content goes, I mean, a lot of these ideas are still missing. We don't have the right class. We don't even know what grade Bradley teaches. He didn't signify that he's teaching elementary. He doesn't mention the school name. He doesn't pick a book. So we could still definitely develop those ideas. Remember, though, we are looking at sample responses that scored about a level 4 or 5. This would be typical at a level 4 or 5. We don't yet have a lot of detail to put in. We're acquiring those skills. And I know a lot of you are wanting that higher level, 9 to 12. So you'll be thinking way up there about adding in these extra details that we've been talking about. I think, too, Bradley sort of has paragraphs, and I say sort of because the spacing is a little bit unusual. He indents here, which is fine, but as he's typing away, he gets 2 words out of his sentence, and for whatever reason, he hits that return key or the enter key on his keyboard, which moves the next line here, but he's in the middle of a sentence. We should not be starting a new line. That should be all the way through. And then he's got about 4 different main ideas, everything from the invitation to why the kids like the book, and so on. Those need to be separated out as well into separate paragraphs. And then we definitely don't want to leave this much space between the end all the way down, right, to the sign off. 1 space would do it. So the paragraphing would definitely want to be improved upon for organization, absolutely, as well as for readability. Okay, on to vocab. Let me know how you think Bradley did in this regard. There's got to be some words or expressions that jump out at you as pretty strong examples of his ability. And I see quite a few, but I'll give you a moment first to think it through. You can pick out even phrases. I see a lot of groups of words, sometimes 4 or 5 words in a row. Yes, they demonstrate the simple sentence structure, but he is using the right words in the right order. So the syntax is correct and it is conveying the right meaning. Any ideas? Not yet, hey? All right, well, just for time's sake, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the examples here that Bradley's demonstrated quite well. And again, they're all simple sentences, which is very common at the level 5. If you could meet with them, they love all your books. And that whole next sentence, I'm asking if you could come in on the 25th of November for a meeting with my class, and so on. So he is demonstrating a much stronger control over these simple sentence structures with more accurate grammar than we saw from Abigail earlier. And that's a really important distinction to make. There are definitely some imprecise and awkward phrases, like on behalf of my class. That's a word choice error. What is that word supposed to be? Not on behave. It's supposed to be on behalf. Yeah, that's a perfect example of how spell check will not help you, because behave is a real word, but it doesn't make sense, right? And then one of your book wrote, and so on. You can see the rest here. So we have some grammatical errors and syntax errors. Even at the very bottom underneath his own name, he's just signed form teacher. It's not necessary to put that there, but if he did, he'd want to at least center or put it against the left margin, I would say. There is some repetitive language, and none of you have mentioned it yet. So I'm wondering if you maybe didn't even notice. Did you notice how much Bradley loves the word love? He's used it about 4 times. And he loves the word books. He's used it about 6 times. So what you'll want to do if you're looking to strengthen your vocabulary score is come up with different ways to express this. You don't always have to say, we love your class. We appreciate your time and attention. We would be so interested in having you come to visit and so on. So play with the language and make sure that you've got at least a decent variety. Okay, and apart from those spacing errors, we do see several little grammatical errors too. So I've gone ahead and identified them for you in yellow just to show you how many. We don't have to worry at this moment in time exactly what types of mistakes, but they're all, capitals or subject verb agreement, spelling, word choice, and so on. I would say there aren't quite as many grammatical errors as we saw from Abigail, but he still does have definitely quite a few. So we are still at the beginner level, which is just fine for now. Anyway, I've turned off the Zoom chat box for just a second because what I'd like to do is throw our next online Zoom poll on screen. You can see it here now. You already know that Abigail got a level 4. So how do you think Bradley did? If you're choosing level 5 right now for him, what that means is he's demonstrated stronger skills in all 4 of those categories. That would be content, vocabulary, readability, and task fulfillment. So don't base your guess on just one element. It always has to be all of them. And it looks like we still have a very clear winner, if you will. So a majority of 64%, 2/3 of you, are suggesting that Bradley has a level 5. And you would be absolutely correct, yes. So when you're just thinking of those 2 responses, and again, you will get these in your study pack. So sometimes reading them both back to back really allows you to see the difference between those 2 levels. So Bradley did demonstrate enough to get into that level 5, which was our minimum benchmark for today. Okay, moving on to writing task 2. So we've already looked at the question and we understand that our boss wants us to decide if we're going to go to the hotel for training and give up 2 days of vacation, or whether we just want to keep our vacation and not go to the hotel. Can we quickly brainstorm just a few ideas in the Zoom chat? Looking at option A here. This is the one where you just want to keep your vacation. You're not interested in training at the hotel. Can you think of a reason, a logical reason to explain to your boss why that would be the better choice? What comes to your mind immediately? If this was your real world situation, what would you possibly think of in this moment? I just want to go on vacation. I don't want to do any work at the hotel. That's what you're trying to argue. Yeah. Stephen, thank you. Family time. Yep. That came to me as well. Or time with friends if you don't have a family. Sure. Yep. Yep. Maybe, as Omar is saying, you already have a pre-planned vacation and you'd like to honor it so you don't lose your deposit. Wonderful. That's 2 ideas right there. And it would be wonderful if you could think of a third. Now, for this one, by the way, if you thought of 2 strengths like we just did, family time and also pre-booked vacation, you could also throw in a third reason that shows a weakness with the other option. So maybe you would think of why going to the hotel would be problematic. That would be a really great answer for sure. Okay. Or can we just for practice sake do the opposite? On the actual test, you're only allowed to support one option, but just to practice the details right now, can we move on to option B? Some of you might have chosen this one. You'd be willing to give up 2 days of your vacation just so you can go to the hotel and train. How would that be beneficial? How would you support this as the best choice? And frankly, you're agreeing with your boss here, so it's probably the easier for the tone. He won't be upset with you, or she won't be upset because you're doing what they want you to do. Yeah, and the first idea both Van and Omar came up with, and I did too, is team bonding. So you'd have an opportunity to get to know your staff better. And you might argue that a stronger professional and even personal relationships among a team simply makes group more cohesive. You'd probably work better together after that. So that'd be a great idea. Yep. Can we think of a second one? Other than just team bonding or getting to know each other, what else comes to mind about spending time at the hotel? They gave it from a practical situation. I know you're still working, but you're still at a fancy hotel. Did you not talk about also having the opportunity to see a different part of the world? And you could even make up the situation that you are at a fancy resort in Cancun, Mexico. So you might say after our training shift for the day, we would still have time to enjoy a sunset and a margarita on the beach. You could do that, as Stephen's saying. we could still enjoy a buffet meal and some drinks after the shifts are done. So that might be something you would draw in as well, and so on. Also talk about professional development, how the skills you'll learn training will make you better at your job when you return to the office and so on. Yeah. Okay, so it's an either or. You have to pick one and one only. So with that in mind, let's see what our own test takers have come up with. So here is our first response. If you could kindly have a little read through. Figure out first what the position is. That should be and is in the first sentence. And then we'll look at the reasoning. Uh-oh. I see the position, but I see an issue with the reasons. And I'm wondering if you'll let us know in the Zoom chat what that problem is. Go for a big ticket item, Hungling. Yeah, punctuation, sure, but there's so much more with this that we need to improve first. When you're trying to improve weaknesses, you always want to choose the most important skills that are going to help your score the most, the absolute most. So I'm going to help you right now by at least identifying the position. And I use green. Green means go. So this person is suggesting that they'll do the training and they'll cut back their vacation. There are many, many grammatical errors here. So let's not worry about that yet. We'll get into that in a minute. But right now, we're just interested in those ideas. So the positions here, we want to go to the hotel. We're willing to give up some vacation time to do that. Here's the first reason, and it makes sense. We can share new ideas to help our job. In other words, we'll learn new skills that will make us more competent in our roles when we get back to the office. So what I just said would be definitely higher level, like more around the 8 or 9 level or up. But it's the same ideas as what we see here, sharing new ideas, helping our jobs, okay? Logical reason, would you agree? I think that makes sense, yep. On the job training will make us better at our job. Here's where we go a little bit off the track, I guess. Look at this idea. He says, he or she, whoever wrote this, our manager or boss wants to share a good technique for our job to make it easier for all of us. Look at that first idea in green right above, sharing new ideas to help our job. Even though the wording might be a little different, you'd have to agree that that second idea I've underlined and read for you, it's the same exact idea. We're still talking about sharing techniques and job skills to make us better. So this can't count as a second reason. It's the same reason repeated in a different way. And the same thing happens a third time. We can also share these ideas with all of our coworkers and even our friends and family members. So we're still stuck on this idea of learning new skills and sharing ideas. So one reason only has been given to support why the training would be beneficial. But now all of a sudden, this writer is going off topic. There's no reason to share our job skills with friends and family as well. This whole question is all about work and the work team. And as a matter of fact, the complete remaining portion of this response focuses all about having a big celebration on the weekend and everybody can come and we can have a party and laugh and eat and so on. So that has nothing to do with the test question of going to the hotel for training and giving up 2 days of vacation. So technically, from our task fulfillment standpoint, we only have one reason to support the position that we've selected. And we have so many details that are off topic and irrelevant. This writer does not demonstrate fully that they've understood those test instructions. Okay, but apart from that, if you wanted to look for at least another strength, the word count is okay, between 150 to 200. So that would be considered a strength in this particular case, interestingly enough. Okay, let's move on to our vocabulary as well. All right, sorry, I skipped over content. Maybe we should have a quick little discussion about that as well. Again, just hammering home, task fulfillment is incomplete, but from the content standpoint, there only is that one reason to suggest. So if we wanted to really improve our content score, we'd want to add in more details about even the type of training that we're doing. We could mention the name of the hotel and the location where we'd be going. You know, again, another reason why doing on-the-job training is helpful, like team building, as you all said. All of that would certainly help to develop the content more. Anyway, on to vocab. There are some words that are quite repetitive. Did you notice? Did you notice which words this author tends to overuse? I noticed 3 different words that I saw repeatedly. So before I circle them for you, it's a really good exercise for you to do a quick scan and see if you can find them. Beat me to it, as we say. What would you say? Yeah, the word easily was used a couple of times. And that one's, it's not horrible. It's only twice, but it's the word boss. Yeah, you have it, the word boss. And there's another one. Nobody's noticed the first one I had. Oh, maybe it's just me. Did you notice this? How many times does this writer use the word share? Way too many times. A lot of you saw this one, boss. Yeah, way too many times. Easily is only used twice, so it's not a huge problem, but they use that word fairly close together. So I think it stands out. So we've seen this before, and it is common at level 4 and 5. It's common because we have to remember this level is acquiring language abilities. So we maybe don't yet have quite a wide range of vocab we know how to use well. But as you know now, if you wanted a higher score in vocab, we do definitely want to come up with synonyms. Like rather than say boss, we might say manager, or we might name the person and so on. We don't always have to stick to the same word over and over. It's just something I remind you about every time you practice a response. If we look at the readability, again, we don't have any paragraphs whatsoever. So that would be a problem. Everything's written in one gigantic block. I'm glad to see that the writing starts against the left margin, but there are no paragraphs. And that makes it incredibly hard for anybody to read this through. Notice as well, there aren't any transitions at all to connect ideas. We don't see things like first of all and secondly and so on. What struck me as unusual, and I'm asking you not to do this, I'm using my laser pointer to show you. This is your computer screen, right? The whole thing, imagine. So when you're typing, all you have to do is keep typing away. And when your line gets to the end of the computer screen, the computer will automatically move you over. But what this person has chosen to do is for every time they get about 2/3 of the way across, they're hitting the enter key on their keyboard to move themselves back. Sometimes they do that at the end of a sentence. So at first I thought maybe that's what they were doing, but not always. This is the middle of the sentence and we're hitting that enter key to go over here. So we've wasted the last third of this computer screen and made a very unusual structure. So please do not do that. That is a huge mistake and it makes it really difficult for anyone to make sense of the structure of the piece. And compounding the issue is once again, we don't have any spaces. We've got either the comma or the period, and then we don't leave that one empty space. We just keep typing. So it's really difficult to see where sentences are beginning or ending. We don't have capital letters to start sentences either. So all of these are really difficult to read. Okay. And again, lots of little spelling and grammar mistakes. Just about every sentence would have one. So with that in mind, I'm pretty confident I'm going to know what you're going to rank this one. But for argument's sake, let's do a little vote here. Would this be level 4 or would this be level 5? What do you think? You've already seen one example of each, and I'm hoping you're thinking back to those 2 samples and you're starting to be able to tell the difference between them. So level 5 is your acquiring language, and level 4, of course, is not quite there. I'll give you about 10 more seconds to make your choice here. All right. Yeah, I see a majority. It's actually closer than I expected, if I'm honest, but that's okay. 55% of you are suggesting that this is a level 4. So your majority is once again absolutely correct. Yeah, level 4. This is more akin to, remember Abigail got the level 4? So they both had similar problems, I would say, with underdeveloped ideas and completely going off topic and not following the test instructions. So that would be a heavy marker of level 4, I would argue. Level 5 tends to at least stick to the topic, but their content details might be a bit more general. So that's another good way to tell the difference. Anyway, let's have a look here now. This is actually the second response. Read it through, please, and see what you think. Have a look at the very first line, and you should be able to tell the position at least. And we'll go from there. See if you can find this person's reasoning. Can you see this person's position at least? Look in the very top line. This is what we have to do right away. This person's choosing vacation. They don't want to go to the hotel. So that's been made very clear. Okay. This person does have 3 different reasons, as Hung is now saying in the Zoom chat. I agree with you, and I'm going to quickly identify them for you just to keep this all together here. Notice the transition here. First of all, that's excellent. When we hear that or see that in writing, we know now that the first reason is coming our way. And the whole reason here is all about basically family time, like the rest of us were talking about. This one tends to be more about children. The second reason, and we see that transition, it's still family, but it's more about the wife. And this is about being romantic with the wife. Okay, and then there is another one. It's still family, but this one focuses more on the parents. Okay, notice the transition. Finally, and the parents are expecting me to visit, right? So we do technically have those 3 reasons to support the chosen position. So already, if you think back to that level 4 you just saw, they technically had 1 reason to support their position and a whole bunch of off-topic details. This writer has it very well coherent and structured, all 3 reasons. Yes, they're talking about family, but they have a different focus and they're all suggesting why vacation is important to them. So that's all fine and well. Look also at the word count. It just squeaks by. 150 to 200 words we know is what we're looking for, and it fulfills that accomplishment. I think there's definitely areas where we could have written more detail to make it even more interesting. But at the very least, we can check that off our list as being done correctly. The tone is fine. I mean, we're writing to the boss and suggesting that we'd rather just have vacation. So I don't see anything that's really bossy or rude towards the boss. But what I did see was one phrase here that was just a bit unusual. When the author was talking about parents are expecting them to visit, the author then says, parents are so mean to me. I think this author is trying to make a joke. I think that's what's happening here. Just saying, oh, geez, they expect me to come all the time. Oh, boy, aren't they demanding? I think they're joking around. The problem is, especially with the lower level English skills, it doesn't come across as a joke. And it's a little bit unclear what they're talking about. This would probably be better something to say in conversation, where you actually have a tone of voice that could really emphasize that you're clowning around. But when we just type this sentence, parents are so mean to me, it's a little bit confusing for the reader to make sense. So I think that we should take that out. Yeah, exactly. That makes sense. If you're just saying my parents are expecting me to visit, this is why I want to have my vacation, it would make sense to say parents are mean to me. If parents are mean, well, then you wouldn't want to go. So therefore, why do you need vacation, right? So take that out. It would just make the whole thing a lot stronger. There are a couple of other ideas too for content that are just a little bit unclear, and it boils down more to syntax and vocab choice. When we talk about how others can't please them and about the wife being the special and most romantic we're always due. No idea what that means. The general notion is that this person wants to have a special romantic time with the wife, but the wording there is a little bit unclear. So we'd want to tidy that up a little bit as well. But remember, we have our position. We want vacation. We've got those 4 transitional words and even one at the end for therefore. This is the first response we've seen today, the only one that's actually given us that concluding statement. Vacation is so important to everybody. They've reminded us what their position is. And then family, friends, and parents need our time. That idea is a little bit simple on its own, but remember throughout this response, we did speak about family time with friends, with parents, the wife, and so on. So we've captured our idea quite nicely, and it's the last thing the boss will read, and hopefully will understand that vacation is just that important to this particular writer. Okay, from a vocabulary standpoint, quite a few ideas here that I can point out for you. Notice the length now of these structures. We've got better control over the simple sentence structure. It's not just 1 or 2 words here and there. We're putting groups of words together, and that is showing a better range and more control, especially that whole last couple of sentences there. So we do see that vocabulary emerging with better control. There are definitely some grammatical errors, almost like word choice errors too, though. So we still have some room there. Once again, there's one word that's repeated so many times. Can you beat me to it and let me know which word you noticed as you were reading? I'm going to circle it for you on the next screen, but I wanted to see if you could spot it first. Which word is overused? Time and time again. I counted 6 times. 6 times same word, too many times. Anybody want to help us out with it? No dice? Aha, Gavin saves the day. Yep. Check this out. Too much. What's another word for vacation? Rapid fire. Vacation. Holiday. Yep. Time off. You got it. Or time away from work. Rest and relaxation time. I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out as they come to me. So when you're typing away and when you proofread your work, when you come back and read this, I want you to notice, I used the word vacation 6 times. How can I change some of these words to get better variety? Trip is a good one. Thank you for sharing that, Nandini. Yeah, you've got it. Okay, anyway. But overall, like I said, the vocab does have lots of strengths. This is just one little mistake, but it is definitely one we want to be aware of. All right, readability works because of those transitions that we've already seen. We do also have capital letters used where they're meant to be, so we know where the sentences are starting and ending. The spacing here is okay. We have no paragraphs, so at least if we could have chunked the different reasons into different paragraphs, that would have helped. But at the very least, the sentences are structured well with the spaces between punctuation marks and capital letters are there. So this improves it so much. Readability wise, okay? And we still have some grammar mistakes, but notice there aren't quite as many mistakes in this response. Sure, there are, and we know that we're looking at about a level 5, and we know that we will have many little minor mistakes. But compare back to some of the other responses you've seen today, there aren't as many mistakes. And I think that's really important to consider as you're going to be looking at this last Zoom poll that we're doing right now. Okay, last one of the day. Do you think that this author earned that level 4 or the level 5? You've got 10 more seconds. Last vote, make it count. It also shows what you've learned today, if you can tell the difference between a 4 and a 5. That's a first step anyway. Okay, this is great. Look at this. 86% of you are suggesting that this is a level 5, and that is a very overwhelming majority. You'd be absolutely correct. Yes, level 5 indeed for that one. That's a pretty high example of a level 5, actually. So well done. Okay, we are at the end of the content section of this webinar, but I'm going to very quickly run through some free study materials and introduce you to the online bookstore. So if you do have last minute questions about CELPIP, now is your chance to get those questions into the Zoom chat before we log out. I will remind you that if you are new to Canada and need to open a bank account, the CELPIP test has a partnership with the National Bank of Canada. And provided you follow the links on the CELPIP website, you could open a bank account with them, with the National Bank of Canada. They will issue you a $300 cashback, and that will cover the cost of your CELPIP test. So I mentioned that simply if it applies to you, that would be great. I think we mentioned this earlier. Of course, a lot of you said you wanted to take CELPIP for your PR applications in Canada. I think a lot of you know too, you could also apply for your postgraduate work permit applications too with the score report from the CELPIP test. We do have 9 free webinars total. They're all 2 hours long, all taught on Zoom like we did today's lesson. You'll see a list of those webinars down the left-hand side here. Note that for writing and speaking, we offer lessons at both Target 5, which we did today for writing, but also at Target 9+. So if you did want to come back for the Target 9+, that would be more intermediate to advanced level there. Note for speaking, we actually have 4 lessons altogether now. There are 8 speaking tasks to get through, so we've chunked them down into separate sessions for you so as not to overwhelm you. But again, they're all free to take, so why not register at the CELPIP website, same as how you got to the session today, and we'd love to see you back for a future webinar. We have a YouTube channel as well called CELPIP Official. And this channel contains, first of all, a recorded version of each of our free 9 webinars. So if you want to wait for us to email you with the link, fine. Or you can go to YouTube on your own there and find the playlist, and you can watch any of the recordings there. It's the same recording that you'll get with the link in email. We also have different instructional series. There's a study tip series there. There's a CELPIP live series. So this is a free resource for you with hours and hours of prep and instruction. So please do check it out when you have time. We have a score comparison chart as well. So if you wanted to look at different samples of writing or speaking for that matter, for any level of CELPIP, by real test takers. This is how you do it. So you're looking at the landing page of the CELPIP website. So right at the very top, you see where it says prepare for CELPIP. You'll want to open that up and click score comparison chart, which brings you here. So when you navigate down, you're going to see the CELPIP score descriptors, which you can download. But here, this is where you'll see speaking scores or writing scores. So you choose whatever you want to study today or that day. And then as you navigate down, you'll notice 3 other little menu options. So clicking on sample responses, response analysis, or level descriptors. Those are the choices. So you get to choose whichever level you're interested in studying more about. All levels are represented. So for example, let's say we choose level 10. Okay, we'll go back up. So right now we're looking at those level descriptors. You click on sample response to read the test question. You will get 2 different test taker answers. They're simply labeled sample A, sample B. So you can review those again for writing or speaking. And then when you click response analysis, that's where you'll get that summarized version of the strengths and weaknesses across all 4 of those categories, exactly like we did today. But it's a great way for you to learn more about whatever score you're aiming for, as we all have our own goal. We do have an official CELPIP podcast as well. You can download these podcasts from Spotify, Apple, wherever else you get your podcasts, or you can find them on the blog section of the CELPIP website. And we do have 2 free practice tests. They're available right at the celpip.ca website, or when you create an online CELPIP account, they'll be downloaded into your account for you to finish. So definitely do the 2 free tests, I would say. And if you wanted to then peruse the online bookstore, you could then purchase other materials if you so desired. I won't get into them today after a long session, but you can read up about each product there on the bookstore. Notice that we sell additional practice tests and study guides and textbooks and online courses and so on. Okay, I will say that when you do register for your CELPIP test, you're going to be given a little bit of time to access this online course for free. So we have a course called Accelerate. What it does is it gives you about 30 or 40 or more videos, instructional videos to watch with activities to complete. And we have practice activities for reading and writing and a separate course for listening and speaking. So you would purchase that entire course, but when you register for your CELPIP test, if you are registering for the general CELPIP test, you'll get 5 hours of free access to try it out. If it's the LS version of CELPIP that you're registering for, you'll get 2.5 hours of free access. And if you do enjoy the course, of course, you can go back and purchase the entire thing. If you have the time, desire, and financial means to actually take a course with a CELPIP instructor or with a prep program, there are many options available to you. So again, on the website, when you look, there's a link here, and you'll get that in your email too. But when you check out the prep program section or network provider section of the CELPIP website, you're going to see all of the different institutions across the world, not just Canada, but internationally as well, that offer their own CELPIP programs, prep programs. All of these courses are taught by certified CELPIP instructors, and they're going to give you lessons and activities and feedback to help you with listening, reading, writing, and speaking based on their CELPIP curriculum. These do cost money, of course, and every institution sets its own scheduling and its own pricing. Some of these courses are online, whereas others are in person. So you can always check that out to see who is offering what and when and so on and so on. Okay, and I'll mention quickly just before we log out that if you are looking to study at a Canadian university or college, you might need to take a language proficiency test at the academic level to prove to the institution that you've got the skills you need to be successful. And if that is the case, Prometric does offer a specific academic English test called the CALE. You can take webinars online. We do offer CALE webinars. You can also find test center locations too, right at the cale.ca website. If you live in one of these 13 countries listed here at the bottom, you have the option of taking the test from your home computer. So this only applies if you're looking to study at a post-secondary school in Canada. But I just thought I'd mention it because you never know. And I'm going to leave you with this today. We've got our customer service email at the very top, info@celpip.ca. You've also got those 4 social media channels mentioned here, so you can easily find them, we hope, online. A reminder that we do go live still on YouTube every second Thursday at 9:30 in the morning Pacific time. That's called CELPIP Live. All of our live episodes are recorded to that channel, so you can always go back and watch. And same with Instagram. We go live quite often, but we don't have a set schedule. So if you subscribe to the channel, I suppose would be the best way to know when the next live's coming up. We sometimes too have sale prices on study products, and we would advertise about that on Instagram and Facebook too. So it might be a good spot for you to check out. Anyway, I do not see any outstanding questions in our Zoom chat. So it looks to me like we maybe have answered them all. So I thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you take away with you today a wealth of knowledge about what skills the rating team is looking for you to demonstrate. And I hope that you continue to practice these skills on your own. And I might just see you back for another webinar in the future. Take care, everybody, and thanks for coming. Bye-bye.